Hello, Namaha. My name is RJ, and welcome to the American Hindu. From the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, starting with verse 62. A man musing on objects develops an attachment to them. From attachment arises desire. From desire arises anger. From anger arises delusion. From delusion, confusion of memory. From confusion of memory, loss of intellect. And from loss of intellect, he perishes. Right? Very famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita. I'm reading from the very excellent commentary by Swami Parthasarathi, which is not a book I recommend for beginners because it is pretty expensive and it's 1,100 pages long. But it is phenomenal, and shout out to Swamiji for that excellent work. Every single spiritual tradition counsels its people against the dangers of anger. Okay, the Buddhists call anger one of the three poisons, alongside greed or unchecked desire and ignorance. Okay? But when we feel anger, what we're not actually feeling is an emotion. What anger is a coping mechanism that addresses hurt, frustration, or fear. All right, hurt regarding something that's happened to us in the past, frustration about something that's happening to us in the present, fear of something that might happen in the future, or a combination thereof. Every time we feel angry, what we're really feeling is powerless. We feel powerless to deal with the thing that has hurt us. We feel powerless about the situation that is frustrating us currently. We feel powerless about what might happen to us in the future, and we don't know what to do about it. And so, because anger emulates, feels like strength, or what we imagine power to feel like, we choose anger oftentimes because it makes us feel temporarily better than embracing that despair from that sense of powerlessness. But that's a very dangerous method to get into, because when we give ourselves over to anger, just as the Gita reminds us, delusion enters our mind. We will behave in ways and speak in ways when angry, when heated up, that we would not ever dream of speaking or behaving in those ways when calmed down. And this is where the confusion of memory comes from. We forget ourselves. We forget the lessons that we've learned from the past. We forget the wisdom that comes from being peaceful and trying to communicate and stepping back from our situation. This is where detachment is not disinterest. Detachment is simply giving an objective view of the situation to yourself, stepping away from it enough to not allow your emotional response to guide or overcome your logical response. And that's what the warning about anger really is. We don't want to lose ourselves because something around us has acted upon us in a way that has caused us to feel hurt or frustrated or fearful. We want to remember the teachings that guide us through anger so that we can move forward. Because anger isn't powerful. Anger is the opposite of power. A 2-year-old throwing a tantrum is angry, but that's not power. In fact, one of the best quotes I've ever heard on this topic, and I don't know its origin, I apologize. If you do know its origin, throw it in the comments. But the saying is, confidence is quiet. Confidence is quiet. If you have to raise your point, if you have to raise your voice rather to get your point across, if you have to shout down the other person, if you have to be the loudest voice in the room in order to make what you're saying count, then what you're saying isn't good enough. You're just aggressively pushing it through. And that's not the same as real power. Anger is what occurs when the powerless are trying to bluff right? When they're trying to compensate for their lack of understanding on how to proceed correctly. Okay? And a much better way to do that is with wisdom, to take a step back, to remove our ego, right, our ahamkara, our ego, from the situation, to remember that contrary to how we may feel in the moment, most people aren't against us. They're just for themselves. And that most occurrences that frustrate us are much more to do with our preference at the moment, our desire for the situation, than the situation itself. You're frustrated with something like traffic. Traffic isn't about you, right? You wanted somebody to behave a certain way, and you're hurt that they didn't. But was your expectation realistic to begin with? You're afraid that something might happen in the future that might cause you pain or suffering. But it also might not. And constantly worrying about it beyond just a general awareness isn't going to cause anything to change except for your happiness in the present. Right? You have to be willing to embrace the situation as it is and as it comes to you. And in no way, shape, or form will anger benefit you in that way. I mentioned Epictetus in a previous video, and he said, how has anger ever taught anyone how to sail a ship? Right? We don't learn from anger. We learn from peace. We learn from the ability to explore naturally and to reach out without being worried about it coming back to hurt us. It's openness that allows us to grow. It's peace that allows us to grow. Anger doesn't teach. Anger doesn't fix. Anger just lies to us briefly by making us feel like we have more control than we do. And it's a very insidious lie, because the more we give over to anger, the less control we actually have. So be careful of anger, and be careful of the habits that you get into. When you respond in anger to something, and this is again from Epictetus, the Stoic I mentioned earlier, you're not just spontaneously getting angry. You are adding to a habit of behavior that has encouraged anger in the past. Maybe it's worked a little bit. All right. Maybe they got your coffee order wrong and you yelled at the manager and you felt strong by making them feel weak. That's not courage. That's just bullying somebody who isn't allowed to fight back. Right. This is this kind of false strength, this false power. So, in conclusion for today, remember, anger doesn't teach. The power that we feel from it is false and misleading. And that when you're truly in control, when you have that confidence of agency, confidence is quiet. So seek that quietude, seek that peace, and don't give yourself over to anger. Thank you very much.